We are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Unfiltered Report. My name is Ryan. Big shout out to my guy Malik for taking the time out of his night before his trip to just do what we just did right now. Please give that a listen if you haven't already. He makes some incredible points as always. Pleasure to have him on, and looking forward to seeing what he's got in store with the boots on the ground coming up this upcoming week and a half or so, as well as all the other beautiful stars of the Unfiltered Report. Can't wait to get everyone back on here in due time, very shortly. Lots to get into this upcoming week. We're about 3 minutes from midnight, which means we're 3 minutes away from turning the page to a new week, and what a week it's going to be. We had mentioned the other night. Maybe my days are all blended together. It might have been 2 nights ago that we broke up a couple of episodes. And tonight we're going back to our roots. We're not going to break it up. Just going to mesh it all into one beautiful, hopefully beautiful, glorious occasion, if you will, of an episode. We're going to do our best. Set the stage for continuing to set the stage for future conversations. But before anything, I want to give a huge shout out Carolina Hurricanes. Last night we came on here. We gave our flowers to the New York Knicks for beating the Spurs in 5 games. Well, earlier tonight, the Carolina Hurricanes, credit to them, they are now Stanley champions. They blanked the Vegas Golden Knights 3-zip on the road in Sin City. Finally, we mentioned the Knicks and some of their trials and tribulations over the years, and a 53-year drought to get over the hump. Well, this Carolina Hurricanes team, I know a lot of people might disagree with me. I know some people might not be a fan of their style of play and how they do things, but in my opinion, obviously I'm an Oilers guy for those that don't know, but I'm a soft spot for the Carolina Hurricanes. I think they've always in most of my NHL brackets that I've been filling out in years past, I've always picked them to go far, make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, either lose in the finals or win in the finals. But I've always had them coming out of the East. It feels like for the last 3-4 years, they've come agonizingly close in recent years. They've made the playoffs 8 consecutive years. It took them a long time to get over the hump and make it to the Stanley Cup Finals. Even in this series, I mean, what roller coaster of a series this was. I mean, you can't ask for a better 6-game series in the Stanley Cup Finals. The same point we made last night about the Knicks and the Spurs. I mean, you couldn't ask for more than a 5-game series. This is one of the better 6-game series, regardless of round you're going to get, and it just happened to be the finals. Before we continue to talk about the Hurricanes, I do also want to give a huge shout out to the Golden Knights. I mean, pretty much every year of their existence, they've been competitive, they've been relevant, they zig when others zag in many ways, and it's just remarkable what they've been able to do in a short period of time as an expansion franchise. They made a bold decision a couple of very close before the playoffs. They fired their coach. They bring in John Tortorella after firing Bruce Cassidy, excuse me, with 8 games left in a regular season. They go from third in the division to first. They knock off Utah. They beat the Ducks, and then they sweep the Avalanche to make it to the finals. It was an incredible finals. But before we talk about them further, again, I just want to go back to the Hurricanes. I want to give them some love. This is again, they made it 8 straight years. They lost in the conference finals twice in the past 3 years, 3 times in this current 8-year run that they've been on. The last time they won it was 2006. So I'm no mathematician, but two decades ago, Rod Brindamore captained that team. And now as a coach, he finally gets a long overdue Stanley Cup as a head coach. They've just done a remarkable job as an organization, being built the way that they've been, finding ways to win on the margins, talented players as well. The goaltending change that they made, a credit to them. They hit all the right buttons in this series. Really, before this series, they didn't face any. I mean, this was their best playoff run. They swept the first two series. They sweep the Senators. They swept the Flyers. They beat the Canadians in five. To only lose three times in an entire Stanley Cup run is remarkable. This is not something that happened overnight. This has been a long time in the making. They really deserve it. I definitely look forward to expanding our hockey coverage on here. I'm gonna do my part, hopefully, to get myself, up the standard in a way that hopefully can hold some weight. I know there are a lot of other people out there that can do the beautiful game of hockey a lot more justice than I can, but I do want to talk about it just a little bit, obviously, just because it was a great series. Stanley Cup playoffs are always a blast. It's a beautiful sport, and I'm hoping that starting this off season, heading into this upcoming season, the plan is to really ramp up our NHL hockey coverage as well. Um, we'll try to do a draft coverage for that as well, just as we want to do for the NBA and the MLB, and we did with the NFL. Going to try to do that with the NHL as well. So for the people out there, you can hold us to it here at the Unfiltered Report. Definitely gonna make that a priority in the midst of this beautiful summer to do that. Cover the off season. We'll go through any trades, free agency signings, just as we'll do, like we talked about with the NBA last night. We're going to do our part to try and do that with the NHL. But yeah, again, you couldn't ask for a better series. Uh, regardless of what anyone else out there thinks, I know some people love the Canes. Shout out to my guy Big Nate too. We'll have to get him on here soon. Recap the playoffs because he can do this a lot more justice than I can, and again, some of the other stars of the Unfiltered Report as well that definitely would love to get on here and give this sport a lot of justice. But I mean, what a series! I mean, it started off in game one, back and forth affair. These are two defensive teams, physical. It's their bread and butter. And, game one, I kind of had a feeling maybe heading into game one that it would be one of those matches where, hey, these are two defensive, physical sides, and it would be one of those matches that might be high scoring. And lo and behold, it was a topsy turvy back and forth affair. Game one in Carolina, the Golden Knights come out on top, 5-4. The Canes go up 2-0. Vegas storms back, takes the lead 3-2 in the second period. Uh, Later in the period, the Canes tied it up 3-3, and then Vegas goes up 4-3 in the third period, and then the Canes tied it 4-4, and then about 3.5 minutes left in the third period of game one. The Golden Knights go take the lead. They take game one. Game two, another back and forth, beautiful affair. Vegas opens the scoring, go up 2-0 themselves, and then this time Carolina in the third period storm back, score three in a row, go up 3-2, only for the Golden Knights to tie it up with about a minute and change left to send it to overtime. And then on the power play in overtime, Seth Jarvis wins it in game two to even the series. Game three, I felt game three was where the series shifted. And I felt game three was when the Hurricanes really made their mark, even though they lost game three. I felt that was when I thought that was when it shifted. I thought Vegas in the first two games, even in many ways, Vegas had game two, and maybe we're singing a different tune if the Canes don't come back in game two and even it up in game three. Game three was an incredible game. I mean, nothing I can say that could do it justice other than just letting the game speak for itself. But in the second period, Vegas go in, they score 4 goals in the second period, only for the Canes on the road in game three to storm all the way back, score 4 goals in the third period, uh, tie it up. We go through an entire first period of overtime, continue to level it up at 4-4, only for the Golden Knights to come out victorious in double overtime. But I felt even though the Golden Knights won that match, won that game, I'm used to still talking about so much World Cup action. Everything's a match to me nowadays. But even though the Knights ended up coming back and winning that game, I mentioned I felt that was when the tide shifted in the series, and lo and behold, the Canes didn't lose again. That third period, I thought really shifted the momentum in that series, even though they lost in overtime. They come back in game four on the road against Vegas. They go out to another 2-0 lead. Vegas cuts it in half in the first period, 2-1, only for Jordan Staal on the power play. Again, credit to him getting back on top of the mountain. We'll talk about him extensively, um, oldest Conn Smythe winner. A great career he's had, and wonderful for him to be able to come back out on top of the Canes. They go up 3-1. Vegas storms back in the second period, ties it three apiece. But then in the third period, again, Jordan Staal with another goal gives them a lead, and then an empty netter, cherry on top, 5-3 on the road. Back in Carolina for Game 5 on Thursday, June 11th, which was the World Cup opener day. We touched on that a lot, and we'll continue to do so. But the Canes go in Game 5 on at home ice. They take care of business at home. Vegas opens the scoring, but then in the first period, Carolina levels it right back 1-1. In the second period, they score 2 goals to go up 3-1. And then the third, my guy I can't even say his name, Svechnikov. I've enjoyed watching him play for a long time. A lot of these guys, they've had a lot of these guys for many years. He scores on a power play. They go 4-1. Vegas cuts one back, cuts the lead in half. But Carolina takes care of business 4-2, all of which leads into Game 6 tonight. My pre-series prediction, I had mentioned I had the Spurs in 7 in the NBA Finals, had the Canes in 7 in the NHL Stanley Cup final. But credit to the Canes, it's only fitting, in my opinion, that the Canes they win the Stanley Cup with the shutout. They've been one of, if not the best, consistent defensive sides in the league for the last 8 years. But there's been a lot of conversation over the years about them, maybe being one of those teams that's, we talked about a little bit last night where there are certain teams where, we talked about it with the Knicks last night, and it goes to show you the beauty of sports where there are so many different ways that you can build a champion. And, we mentioned the Knicks. They make the move to fire Tom Thibodeau, and they get over the hump with Mike Brown and the new coaching staff, and the only holdover really being, Rick Brunson, Jalen's dad. But the Carolina Hurricanes did it in a much different way. They never wavered from Rod Brindamore. They continued to stick with him. A lot of organizations would not have had that level of patience, but credit to the Canes. They never wavered in what they were building, year after year, getting as close as they had, and especially in the last 3 years, to come so agonizingly close for many years, for them to finally get over the hump with this group of players. I got nothing but love for these guys. I mean, Taylor Hall, great player, Seth Jarvis. I mean, you go down the list, it's just a lot of really good players. They all fit together perfectly. They put in a shift defensively, and it was only fitting that this was the way that they come out victorious. With the only shutout of the Stanley Cup Finals, it's only fitting that they do it in that manner. Again, I got nothing but respect for the Canes, regardless of whether they win another one or not with this current core. They're forever immortalized as champions 20 years later. So I got nothing but love for the Canes. I know some people might disagree. I know some people will agree. There's been a lot of Knicks propaganda, but you know what? The Canes got a really rowdy fan base as well out there in Carolina. Just a really, really, really gratifying moment for them. And again, I mentioned, I've always had a soft spot for the Canes, and I think this is just one of those. A huge tip of the cap goes to the Carolina Hurricanes for being able to come out on top. We're going back to Vegas. I think obviously the big question is going to be whether they decide to keep Mr. Tortorella or not. I mean, you would imagine, because there were when they brought him in, there was no guarantee that they would make him the full time coach after the season. You would have to imagine that getting them all the way to the cup in the manner in which they did would give him an opportunity to get a full crack at it in a full season with the Golden Knights. But we mentioned it earlier, they zig a lot when others zag, and they do things their own way. And I think both of these organizations I have a lot of respect for. Um, they're really two of the more consistent franchises in the last 8 years. Obviously, the Golden Knights have only been in existence for so long. But, in these, I mean, they've been a consistent playoff team, the Golden Knights, pretty much every year of their existence, which is a remarkable feat for an expansion franchise. Because I think it would be a great conversation, but I think you could definitely, I don't know if there's much of an argument. They've had the most success for an initial expansion franchise in the modern era in any sport, in the way that they've been able to go about it and succeed. Um, but look, nothing but love for the Canes. We'll see again what happens with Tortorella or not, whether they make him the full time coach or not. You never know with Vegas, but I would imagine that he's earned himself an opportunity to come back. Bruce Cassidy, obviously, we'll see what happens with him as well, considering that he's still under contract. When we do our off-season deep dive and whatnot, I know there's a lot of chatter going around with the Oilers, their head coaching search. My beloved Oilers. I know originally they had wanted to speak with Bruce Cassidy, and even though obviously the Golden Knights fired him, they said no because he's still technically under contract with them. And now there's been some rumblings that the Oilers want to go in and look into Mike Babcock, which has been a very controversial conversation in league circles. The NHLPA has already, kind of laid the groundwork a little bit to kind of say, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. Um, Time will tell. I mean, again, I love my Oilers, but at the same time, they've definitely made some very let's call it fascinating decisions in recent years, with the general manager hiring and now with the coaching search that they got going on. Even when it's your own team, you got to call it how it is sometimes. And, so I look forward to doing that deep dive in due time. But again, I got nothing but good things to say about the Canes, rightful champions. They've come so close over the years, like we mentioned, and for them to finally get over the hump, I give them credit. So, it goes to show you, going back to the point we were trying to make earlier, where there's different ways to build a champion, and there's different ways of running a successful organization and a successful franchise. And, we mentioned last night with Tom Thibodeau, he wasn't going to be the guy to get them over the hump. And they were validated in that. But then with the Canes, a completely different approach, sticking with Rod Brindamore, sticking with the play style, mind you, too, which a lot of people would say, oh, maybe that's not the type of play style that's going to get you over the hump. Maybe that's the defensive, style that they've had over the years. It'll get you to the playoffs. Maybe you win a round or two, but you won't win the whole thing. And they went out and they proved people wrong. And part of how they proved people wrong was not only in sticking with Rod Brindamore, but in the last couple of years, especially this year, they really made great concerted efforts as an organization to add a little bit more offensive firepower, which helped get them over the hump. Uh, so again, different ways of building a champion. With the Knicks, Tom Thibodeau goes, they bring in a new coaching staff that unlocks the current core of players that they had. But with the Canes, they stick with Rod Brindamore, they stick with the core, and they just add players to that core to get them over the hump. So again, I think it just is a perfect illustration of, there's no one way to do anything in this world, and sports is no different. It's, I always like to say, sports is the perfect metaphor for anything in life. You can connect anything in life to sports, because in many ways, sports is an extension of life and vice versa. And there's no one way to build a team, regardless of the sport. From the top on down. One thing I do want to say, while we're on the subject of the Canes, I do want to set up a future deep dive. We'll talk about it a little bit right now. Um, but something I've been wanting to talk about on here for a long time is this Tom Dundon situation. Tom Dundon is the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes. We've mentioned in the past, we've talked about ownership structures and whatnot, and how that plays a huge part in organizational success. We've talked about how there are a lot of owners or ownership groups that own multiple franchises across different sports, some even in the same sport. We mentioned Blue Co., Malik's beloved Chelsea, owning multiple clubs, for example, and I mean multiple other examples of that in the global game of football. But then you've got examples of American owners that own multiple teams. We mentioned Jerry Reinsdorf and his family last night. Owning the Bulls and the White Sox. I mean, you go down the list. There's so many examples. And Tom Dundon recently became an example of another owner who now has two franchises under his investment portfolio, if you will, if you want to talk about it in that perspective. Owner of the Canes, bought the Portland Trailblazers earlier this year. Um, and, it's something I've been wanting to deep dive for a long time is in NBA circles when Tom Dundon bought the team. There's been a lot of chatter just in the last couple of months. I mean, I think they only recently, cleared him to buy the team and everything, and he's only owned the Blazers for a very, very short period of time. Uh, and I think it's just really fascinating to me the contrast between how Tom Dundon has been viewed in NHL circles versus how NBA media has been covering Tom Dundon since he took over. There's been a lot of propaganda in NBA circles against Tom Dundon. Some of the quote unquote cost cutting measures, laying off certain staff member, organizational staff. There's been some rumblings about the Blazers wanting to pay below the typical league average of what an NBA head coach would make, that sort of deal, wanting to, maybe do things I don't know. There's been a lot of anti-Tom Dundon propaganda in NBA circles. And I think when I read all that, I always felt that, for whatever reason, the NBA media was up, as the saying goes, they had their panties in a wad. They're all up in arms about this guy, and they were completely against this guy. And uh, we'll see what he does with the Blazers. But you know what? I think you got to look at it where you always like to look at organizational success and what Tom Dundon as an owner, I'm not saying Tom Dundon is solely responsible for the success of the Canes, but listen, the Portland Trailblazers would kill to be where the Carolina Hurricanes are. And if Tom Dundon is able to bring in the organizational structure to allow the basketball people to do what he's allowed the hockey people to do, I think that's going to be a really interesting deep dive that I want to set up because there's been a lot of chatter about Tom Dundon in NBA circles, and they've been bashing this guy, talking about how he's a cheap poor billionaire. He's a poor billionaire compared to the other richer billionaires, and maybe angling for a move out of Portland even. And there's been a lot of chatter about that. I'd be happy to provide some examples of that. It's been very interesting. Um, Obviously, the Blazers have a big offseason too themselves. We're going to talk about them. They still haven't decided whether they want to retain Tiago Splitter or bring in a new head coach. Um, but look, Tom Dundon is look, I'm going to paint you guys a quick little picture. We're going to set up a future deep dive. Just so that I want to really do it justice, but just to kind of initially set the stage of this conversation because I personally think it's really fascinating. If you'll allow me the opportunity to do so, which I greatly appreciate. I guess not really that you have a choice. I'm gonna do it anyways. Uh, but there's been a lot written about Tom Dundon. You know, he buys the Blazers. Um, his bid was approved, 4.25 billion to buy the Blazers, formally approved by the NBA on March 30th. So I mentioned it wasn't that long ago. Um, and he, again, he became this NBA pariah by NBA media, which I've always stood by the fact, and I'll continue to stand by it, that NBA media is the worst media in sports by a large margin. Um, I'm not justifying Tom Dundon in any way. I'm just saying I think it's been interesting that they've really been coming after this guy. Again, I think some of the things he did were rightfully critiqued. There was in the Blazers opening round series against the Spurs, it was reported that they didn't have their two-way players travel with the team. They laid off a bunch of support staff, and there was a lot written about him that people were calling him cheap. Bill Simmons of the Ringer called him El Cheapo. I mean, that's just one example. I mean, there was like every day I felt like from March 30th up until recently, it feels like they've just been. I mean, this dude's been on a chopping block in NBA media circles. I mean, they've been absolutely tearing this guy apart. Uh, you know, and what's been fascinating to me is that while NBA media has been ripping this guy apart, people in NHL circles have nothing but good things to say about this guy. So look, I'm sure the truth is always somewhere in the middle. I'm not here to spread Tom Dundon propaganda myself. I don't know the guy. Again, I just think it's fascinating where you look at it where you have a guy who it's very rare in my opinion. It's been one of those fascinating case studies to me where you have an owner buy a team and to have the perception of that owner be such a stark contrast from one league to the other. And ironically, he buys the Blazers on March 30th, and 2 months, 2.5 months later, the Canes are Stanley Cup champions. Look, I'm not here to talk about billionaires and owners. I really don't care about all that. I just like to report the facts of what's out there, and let people come to their own conclusions. Um, but you know what? I would just say for the Blazers people out there, for the NBA media out there, I think obviously you want to report the facts. Yes, I think it was a poor decision and a bad look. For example, with the two-way players, I would continue to bang that drum. But I think some of the things that I've seen in NBA circles, I think you see a lot of propaganda pieces go both ways. I mean, James Dolan had an incredible propaganda piece come out this morning. I mean, they must have paid a hefty price for that. I mean, so it goes both ways, both positive and negative. But I think at the end of the day, we always like to say the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So, look, there's a lot. We talked about stadiums last night. Look, Portland's going to be a very interesting deep dive. Tom Dundon, in his already very short time as owner, has already mentioned the fact that the Moda Center, which is 31 years old, uh, needs some renovations. It's caused a little bit of anxiety for Blazers fans about whether they're uh, going to stay in Portland or not. Um, but you know what? I think I would just say that this is going to be a very, very fascinating deep dive because, we mentioned with Major League Baseball, there are teams like the Brewers, the Rays, that they might not spend as much money. They might not have Dodger money. They might not get the publicity. They don't have Knicks propaganda coming out every other day. But even though they're quote unquote cheaper and they cost cut and whatnot, that doesn't mean that they're poorly ran organizations, which is a caveat. It's not always about how much money you spend. It's about, are you spending the money smartly? Are you investing the money in the right places? And I think everything. I would just caution the NBA media out there to really take a full scope of things, and instead of completely bashing this dude, just report the facts of it. But let's see how the process plays out because like I said, if there are these cost-cutting measures, quote unquote, but they're ran like the Carolina Hurricanes, like I mentioned, I think the Blazers would kill for that level of consistent success, especially in today's NBA climate where, parity's never been richer and it's, again, obviously the Knicks won, but look, I think what I want to continue to bang the drum on with the NBA is, here at the Unfiltered Report, we want to help usher in a new era of NBA coverage where we give love to all 30 teams and not just the Knicks. And we want to talk about the Blazers, we want to talk about the Kings, we want to talk about the Charlotte Hornets, the Wizards, the Jazz, even New York's other team, the Nets. Um, we want to give love to all of these franchises because sports are so much more than just the big markets and the stars. And the NHL, I think, I've always respected the NHL and the way that they kind, it does feel, it's one of the leagues I think that really, I think is, as far as professional leagues go, at least from the offset, it does feel, it's a pure league compared to maybe other leagues where, yes, obviously they're a billion-dollar organization and they're going to be hunting down profits and whatnot, but I think they do a solid job. I think all things considered, as far as the NHL goes, of and what we'll try to do, we want to give love to all these NHL franchises as well. I think with this Tom Dundon guy, I would just caution the NBA media, like, let's see what the Blazers do. Let them hire a coach let them build out the front office how they want to do it. Let them, build out the roster that they want to, however they want to build it, and then let's come to some conclusions. But let's not totally bash the guy. I mean, look, you can critique things. I'll be we want to call it fair. We do want, again, the two-way thing. I think obviously was a bad look, was a bad move. Obviously, nobody likes to see people get laid off and fired. But I mean, even when those layoffs happen, I mean, some of the things that were getting reported that I was reading, I mean, it was like it was like, oh, it was a funeral, it was so sad. We can't believe it. We can't believe like the PR person got fired and like, the people in the office and yes, it's sad. You never want to see people get fired, but I just feel like there were a lot of people that were quick to jump on the bandwagon and bashing this dude for how he was running the organization in NBA circles. And I think what I would caution the NBA media is that it's not always, there's a lot more to running a successful organization. And I think you can find evidence of that in the NHL and Major League Baseball. And I'll be fascinated to see if Tom Dundon can bring that level of organizational building or, like, look, let's call a spade a spade. They're not bringing in Dodgers money, Steve Cohen hedge fund money. They're not bringing in Yankees and Knicks money. They will be ran like the Carolina Hurricanes, like the Rays, like the Brewers, but it doesn't mean that they can't have success. And the Carolina Hurricanes are a great example of that. So while we continue to have more basketball conversations, I feel like this is a perfect ability to preview that further deep dive. Again, we mentioned last night, we want to talk about stadiums. We mentioned the Rays. The Rays want a new stadium. We're going to go through the sporting landscape, kind of do our due diligence, not only what we want to do on the field, on the pitch, on the ice, on the court, but off of it, the business side of it, ownership structures, all these different angles of what makes up sports, what it is, the good, the bad, the ugly. So I would just caution the NBA media. Like I said, I think they were quick to bash this Tom Dundon guy, and there were some really really insane hit pieces. I would just encourage the people out there to go do your own research. Um, you know, there was one piece in particular that I did read where Tom Dundon himself, uh, on May 30th, he opened up about a couple of things. You can find this article on OregonLive.com. I would encourage people to read it for themselves, but I will share a couple of snippets. I will read the article as best I can. If you'll allow me the opportunity to just pull up a couple of snippets while I do that, because I normally don't. We like to go off the rip here, obviously, but sometimes when you want to be able to read stuff, you just have to pull it up and then put that back away and get back to going off the rip. So here we go. Uh, Tom Dundon arrived in the North Carolina capital only a few hours before puck drop on Saturday, enough time for his 10-year-old son Tegan to get in a skating session at the team's practice facility near the airport. Dundon's Hurricanes went on to win an overtime thriller in Game 2 of the NHL's Eastern Conference Finals when Nick Eller scored 4 minutes into the extra period. The man who has shocked the NBA with his brash approach to owning the Trailblazers lingered at the Lenovo Center long enough to visit the locker room where Tegan played with some of the players' own children. Then it was back to the jet. Dundon was home in Dallas before 1 a.m. I was also in Raleigh this weekend. This article was written by Bill Oram of the Oregonian, Oregon Live. So he goes on to say, I, not me, just so people know, was also in Raleigh this weekend, curious to learn more about the widely disparate realities for Dundon's two teams. The story that ran on the front page of Sunday's print edition of the Oregonian. What is that story? Well, the story that ran uh, was Tom Dundon saying, give it some time. And there's another article you can read inside Tom Dundon's NHL success amid Trailblazer uncertainty. Another article by Bill Oram. So I want to go back. The Hurricanes are one of the NHL's best teams. Fans are thrilled, and when they think of the club's owner, when they think about him at all, it's positive. For Trailblazers fans, that is far from the case, given the impasse over Motor Center renovations, severe layoffs, and a general perception of gratuitous cost cutting. Although Dundon was in Raleigh to catch up with his other team, the one trying to win its first Stanley Cup in 20 years and its first since he became the owner in 2018, which again, we mentioned that the Canes have made the playoffs 8 straight years. It was important to see where he stood on the developments in Portland. Over the course of multiple conversations, he and I discussed the recent layoffs, his long term plans in Portland, and his view of the city's political climate. So I would encourage people out there to read this entire article. I will not read the whole thing, but I will read a couple of excerpts from this Q&A. Question number one, you've said that you don't love watching important games in person because you get too stressed. What is playoff overtime hockey like for you? People can read that on their own. How did you react when Nick scored? Okay. Now here's where we get to the juicy stuff. How do you reconcile the success you've had in Raleigh and the way people feel about your tenure there with the way you're viewed in Portland? Having proof of concept in one place, but people are still highly skeptical in the other. His answer: the world tends to want to highlight or look for problems. I don't know if that's more pronounced in Portland or not. Clearly, I'm doing stuff and people have that perception of me. It would be crazy if I didn't think about what my role in it is. But it is strange to think that I was able to figure out how to build a bunch of successful businesses, employ thousands and thousands of people, and then buy a hockey team, have some success, and then the going in assumption is different than the way I see it. I have to think about why that's happened. Maybe it's human nature to want to focus on the wrong thing sometimes, and that's something I can't do anything about. Another question. On the podcast with Max Kellerman and Rich Paul, you said as it related to the two ways in a t-shirt towel thing that, quote, hey, that's just me not knowing the league yet. His answer. Oh, that was another thing too. They didn't have playoff t-shirts. That was another cost-cutting measure that people were giving them a lot of shit about. The fact that t-shirts and all these are what people tend to focus on probably means that we probably haven't done a good job of explaining, or maybe I didn't think we should have to, because I wouldn't have thought people would move toward the wrong things. Before I came in, we were talking during the trade deadline and we had a choice. You could sell off some things for future assets, or you could try to create the culture where you win. To me, that's way more important than the stuff that's out there. The choice we made was to add a piece, which ended up being Fit Krejci, and try to create the culture of we're here to win. And a lot of those other things I don't think have anything to do with that. I haven't been in a lot of situations where people don't think that the relentless pursuit of trying to win is an advantage. I'm pretty sure over time that will become obvious. Next question. The one thing that is directly impactful was the reduction of staff, 70 plus people last week. Why were such extensive layoffs necessary in your mind? They have twice as many people as we have in Carolina, and my experience is that less layers gives people more accountability and they do a better job. Then you know that you're getting a great job done and you don't end up in the situation where many companies end up, which is everyone's looking around for somebody else to do it, complaining about what's fair and not fair. I've seen the job done really well with a lot of accountability, no drama, and a lot of honestly happiness. People are happier when they're busy and productive. That is the way I think things should be done. And more people just more problems usually. I think Portland just had too many people. I just asked them to look at it, and I think they came to the same conclusion. We didn't run a budget or give them a goal of headcount. We just said, is this being done the right way? Is it efficient? Are people as committed and able to make an impact on the business every day? And if not, let's get it right so we don't have to talk about it again. This was mostly on the business side. The basketball, they're two separate businesses. Taking care of the players is not. We don't have a budget for that. It's whatever it takes to put them in the best position to win. That's what we're going to do. The business, I'm going to run like you run every other business. Next question. What challenges did you face in getting an arena deal done in Raleigh? And how did that process compare to what you were working through in Portland? The Raleigh process was multi-year, and the difference was in Portland, a lot of the money is money that we generate. It's taxes that we create that the city and state are investing back in the building. That's a huge portion. In Raleigh, it was kind of hotel money, hotel, motel tax money. And there was an opportunity to develop the area around the arena because North Carolina is growing. We mentioned this before with the new age stadium models with these entertainment districts and owning the properties. Even the Ducks are doing a similar thing with OC Vibe. Uh, Anyways, we're about to announce that we're going to build a big office building on that property, which has been just a parking lot. It's just a huge difference. They weren't creating taxes on the people who work there and play there and then giving them back. They were actually taking money from outside of the building and investing it into the building and then giving us rights to develop around the building. So this one, Portland should have been easier to get done. Next question. But it does seem like it's more challenging. At least in Raleigh, it's felt like maybe more of the essential people were rowing in the same direction than it feels in Portland. His answer: it seems like Portland's more political. It's more emotional. It's a more emotional subject. North Carolina has a fund to bring sporting events to the state. There's a lot of businesses moving in. They're lowering their income tax. They're doing a lot of things. They're in a different place in terms of economic development. There was a different philosophy. When I first Portland, it was suggested they need a new arena. And I looked at it and said, well, the only way they could do a new arena is if they raise taxes. And I don't think they should raise taxes. It would be counterintuitive to raise taxes in a place that, for us to be successful, we need the business climate to improve. We don't want to be a part of that problem. I think you know, but the Trailblazers are last in sponsorship. That's a big part of the controllable revenue for a basketball team. We've got to try to solve that business problem. You've got to have companies. Companies have to thrive and want to grow, and we've got to help them grow by participating in our brand with these companies. If we did a new building and had to raise taxes to build it, we wouldn't be part of that solution. Next question. When you hear concerns from city councilors and city and county commissioners, do you feel like they're trying to renegotiate the deal, or is that an expected part of the process? His answer: I don't know enough about their process. I know that we came in with an intention to do something that could just start moving forward immediately because the building is older and we do need to get to work and time never helps deals. And now they have a choice. I would have thought it would be done by now, but they are elected to do their job and they're going to do whatever they think is right, and then we'll respond to that. But I wasn't trying to get our best deal there. If we really want to get the best deal in life, there are other ways to do it than the way we're doing this. So we were trying to do something that could get done until we can move forward. Whoever these people are, if they weren't party to the original framework, I can't hold them to it, and I don't expect to. But if they want to make changes, then we'll just have to look at what those are and evaluate at that time. But I know time makes the deal harder, not easier. I will allow people to go in and read the rest of that article if they want with the Q&A. I'll be the first to caveat there's a lot in there. Obviously, there I don't agree with everything in there. So I don't want to make it seem like I'm a Tom Dundon propagandist or anything like that. That's not my point. There's a lot that I'm sure him and I would disagree on, and I disagree on fundamentally. If you've listened to these recordings, you know as much. And I hope that remains to be the case. The bigger point of what I'm trying to make, which I would like to set up for future conversations, is a multifaceted point. Number one, there's the stadium element. We always like to talk about. There's a lot of shit that goes on behind the scenes. There's a lot of politics that gets involved. There's a lot of. I mean, we're gonna do a huge deep dive, like I mentioned. We're gonna really talk about all these different things, and we'll highlight how, and in many ways there are a lot of people behind the scenes that pull strings that maybe doesn't get as much coverage and as much but I think it's very important to talk about. I think it allows a perspective for people to understand not only what works but also what doesn't, what's wrong about sports as much as well, what's wrong about politics as well. And I think the only way to do that is to give case studies and allow people to come to their own conclusions and read into these things themselves and see if it maybe tickles their brain in a certain way and see what they agree with and what they don't. But the point that I want to make beyond, again, the stadium stuff, beyond whether maybe the Blazers relocate or they don't, is a separate conversation. The bigger point that I wanted to make was that there was a lot of NBA propaganda coming in when this guy, Tom Dundon, bought the team with the cost cutting measures that they implemented. Again, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't agree with as far as the propaganda pieces that were put out. The only point that I really want to highlight again is that as far as the Blazers go, let's give them an off season to let's see who they hire as their head coach. Let's see what they do in the draft, in free agency, in the trade market. Let's continue to monitor the situation and then continue to add layers to it. And when there's shit that we need to call out, we'll be the first to call it out. But I just felt that it was a very interesting contrast to me to see how he's been covered in NBA circles versus NHL circles. Obviously, the Canes' success goes much beyond Tom Dundon. All the credit, it goes to the front office, Rod Brindamore and the coaching staff, the players. But sometimes, like we mentioned, ownership is a big part of it, and you need that. Sometimes, look, are you going to agree with ownership on everything? Of course not. I'll be the first person to come on here and bash ownership in all these different sports. And there are a lot of things. I've always been of the opinion that sports was really never intended to be $1 billion business. It was never meant to be run like a business. It was never meant to be entertainment. It was never supposed to be incessantly filled with sponsorships and advertisements and commercials. Sports is supposed to be about sports. It's supposed to be about competition, about different ways of building a team. And that's kind of what I want to highlight as well. Is I think with this Blazers situation, as we continue to do our NBA deep dive, I'll just be fascinated to see if they can replicate what they've done with the Canes, with the Blazers, because then I think we'll come back in 8 years or so, wherever the Blazers are. Maybe they're still in Portland. Maybe they're on the moon. Who knows? I couldn't tell you. Look, maybe Tom Dundon's not. Look, look again. I'm not here to spread Tom Dundon propaganda. Don't know the guy. Don't care for the guy. They're not paying me commission to talk about this. It's just something that I found really fascinating when he bought the team and the board of governors of the NBA approved the deal from March 30th to when that article came out on May 30th. And here we are, June 15th at 12:45 in the morning. So June 14th, leading into June 15th, the Carolina Hurricanes are Stanley Cup champions. And let's just see what happens with the Blazers before, look, when there's bullshit to call out, we'll be the first to call it out. And we're going to do it with the stadium stuff because there's a lot of really fucked up shit that goes on behind the scenes. That there's a lot of things that the fans get screwed on. and the people that love sports the most are the ones that get hurt. And I think it's important to talk about these things and to talk. To me, I think the people got to own these teams more than anything. If it was up to me, if we wouldn't, in sports, it wouldn't be the owner that hosts the trophy first, in my opinion. If it was me, like, but again, I'm not an owner. I'm not an owner of a team. I'm not a billionaire. I don't own a team, but I do love sports, and I think it's a part of the conversation. And to me, I think look, if lucky, one day I get to that point to be able to buy a team, which knock on wood, I guess. But I'm sure for myself, you never know what you would do in that situation. I'm sure there would be things that I would want to go in and do differently. There are things that he said in that article that of course, I don't fully agree with. But the main point again that I want to make is I think the NBA media needs to. I think there are a lot of other areas that NBA media should be pounding and sounding the alarm on that go much deeper than this Tom Dundon guy. And that's what we're going to continue to do here at the Unfiltered Reporters. Actually sound the alarm, the level 10, things that they were doing with this guy with, when this whole cost cutting thing came around and the 70 layoffs and the t-shirts and the two ways. Look, again, do I justify it? No, of course not. But what I'm trying to get at is a much bigger picture here of number one, I think there are a lot of other deeper issues that NBA media doesn't talk about again because there's a lot of propaganda pieces out there that go multiple different ways, and then also just continuing to go back to the same point, whether it's Major League Baseball, NHL, there are ways in building a successful team and a successful franchise, even if you don't have the same level of investment as other franchises. I always like to talk about the article I read a long time ago about how there's a class system of billionaires, and I'm sure that that's true. But look, sports is for the people. Sports is not for billionaires. Sports is for everybody. And I hope that's another thing that people take away from this conversation as well, is that at the end of the day, we want to give love to the people that are day to day watching the games, following the sports, and I think this is just a part of the teams and of the sport. And I think it's just something that's really fascinating to me. And it's going to be a deep dive that we're going to continue to talk about. And when we talk about the Blazers throughout the offseason, this will be a part of the piece. How does this, who do they end up hiring as their head coach? We'll find out in due time. And when they do, we'll come in here and we'll let it be known about what they're going to do. Um, I mentioned, uh, you know, NBA draft. We'll see. Portland, their draft pick in the first round, they don't have one. I'm not sure off the top of my head if I don't even know if they have any draft pick, to be honest with you. Um, I will have to. I really don't think they do. Yeah, they don't have any draft picks. The Portland Trailblazers. So heading into the draft, that's another thing we'll monitor. Do they trade maybe into the second round? Maybe they buy a pick. Maybe they hit the undrafted market pretty hard. Before Tom Dundon came in, Caleb Love's a guy. I thought played really well for them this past season on a two-way. And he was really a key player for them in the early parts of the season. And I do feel like him being on a two-way was a bit of a tragedy because I think Caleb Love is one of those players that really deserves some playing time deeper on in the season. And so we'll see with this new ownership group coming in. What do they do? Do they maybe buy their way into the second round? Maybe they're very aggressive in the undrafted market and trying to corner certain guys to kind of angle them to fall out of the second round. How do they build their summer league roster? How do they build their squad essentially? What do they do with their head coaching search? So we'll continue to add all the pieces to the puzzle. And again, when there's bullshit to call out, we'll call it out. We'll call it how it is. But more than anything, what we always want to do here is just report the facts and let people come to their own conclusions more than anything. And also separate the fact from the opinion. So I've got my opinions like anyone else, but don't take my opinion for fact. Take the fact for the fact, and then come do your own research out there if you're fascinated by this. Let me know what you think about it as well. And if anyone wants to come on here and talk about it, I think it's a really fun conversation. If anyone wants to join in these stadium conversations that we're going to do, we're going to talk about the Blazer Stadium, the Ray Stadium, these NFL stadiums, NBA, the other NBA stadiums, again, the political part of it, the taxes, and who pays for the stadiums, and should taxpayers pay for billionaires stadiums? Which again, you asked me, of course not, and I'm going to continue to bang that drum. Um, I've always been of the opinion that, and maybe this is a utopian way of thinking, but I've always felt that in my humble worldview, if the taxpayers are putting their tax dollars into a stadium, then all the people that are paying tax dollars should get a piece of ownership. I'll let people think about that as well. Let me know what you think about that as well. So it's a really fascinating conversation. I can't wait to have more of them. But I also, like I said, I can't wait to just talk about the actual roster building stuff too. And that's something that I'm really, really excited for. Um, I personally, I cannot wait to keep deep diving these. The NBA offseason, the NHL offseason. It's going to be a blast. Um, so again, please stay with us. Uh, you know, stick with the Unfiltered Report here. If anyone wants to join us and have these conversations, and we know each other, reach out. If you don't and you want to be a part of it, email the unfiltered report at gmail.com. I'll be happy to set that up. It'd be an honor and a pleasure. But this has been the Unfiltered Report. We'll be right back here in just a second. We're gonna recap day 3 of the College World Series in Omaha. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things going around in the day to day of Major League Baseball that have happened. Some of the noteworthy things. Um, Continue to add to that conversation. And then we'll be back here to talk more about the World Cup as well. There's a lot of stuff about the World Cup, especially with tomorrow's matches onwards, that I really would like to get into as well. There's been a lot of stuff we haven't talked about yet that we're going to have to get into in due time, and that as well. So a lot of conversations on the docket, lots to look forward to. Hopefully, can't wait. Cheers. We'll be right back. But for the time being, this has been the Unfiltered Report. My name is Ryan. May you stay safe out there, and may you have a great start to your Monday. And wherever you listen to this from, may you have a better day today than you had yesterday, and each day better than the last. Cheers.